Hey guys, my name's Billy Lawson and I am your Lake Fork guide. I'm out here, I want to talk to you about a 6th Sense fishing product today. It's going to be the Divine Hybrid Jig. If you like to jig fish a lot like I do, you definitely want to check this video out. Okay, let's start off with our setup and how we're going to get set up for a day of jig fishing with the Divine Hybrid Jig. First things first, talking about the rod. 6th Sense Luxe rods, 7.5 extra heavy with the fast action. Boys, this is a scrape stick. I mean, this thing, it's got a lot of meat on it, and when you're jig fishing, that's real important. You know, these jigs that we're fishing here, these hybrid jigs, got a big beefy hook. We're catching a lot of big fish on jigs. They catch bigger than average fish. Out here where I'm at in East Texas, we got a lot of thick, nasty cover, big grass, big wood. We need to get that fish hooked real good, get him up and get him in the boat like right now. And this is absolutely the rod to do that with. 6th Sense Luxe rod, 7.5 extra heavy, fast action. That's the one you want. For the line, unless I'm fishing really thick vegetation, I'm always going to go with 20-pound fluorocarbon. That's going to be my deal. On a reel with a jig, it's got to be high speed. It's 7-to-1. If you've got those 8-to-1 burners, use those. I want the fastest gear ratio possible on a jig. You know, the reason that is with a jig, I'm never moving the jig with my reel handle. You know, I'll drag the jig or I'll stroke the jig and I might hop the jig and then just pick up my slack. I'm never going to actually move this jig with my reel handle. If I'm turning that reel handle, it's only for two reasons. I'm either trying to catch up to a fish that knocks slack in my line, or I'm trying to get my bait back in to make another cast. And either way, I want it here as fast as possible. All right, let's talk about a couple of key features about this hybrid jig that, you know, the real reasons why I love it so much. One is the hook's great, and there's a lot of jigs with great hooks, but this has got a great hook in it. It's a big beefy hook that's going to be able to handle any fish in any cover situation that you might need. The next is really the meat and potatoes and what I feel like sets this jig apart. The head design on a jig is always the most important part to me, and there's a few reasons. One is it's going to affect how it comes through cover. It's going to in some ways affect the action of the bait when you're dragging it, and the big deal is it's going to affect how you hook the majority of your fish. So what I look for when I go to buy a jig, I never want a jig that is taller than it is wide. You know, when a fish has a jig in its mouth, if it's taller than it is wide, then the long sides on the side, as that's in that fish's mouth, when you go to set the hook, that jig will want to turn sideways, and then you're going to hook the fish in that soft spot in the corner of his mouth. You never want to do that. You always want to try and get that hook in the top of the head. Now, I'm not saying you won't randomly hook some in the top of the head, but you'll have more fish get in the corner, and that's a bad deal with the jig. You always, like I said, you always want that head to be wider than it is tall. A football jig does that better than anything else. But the problem with a football jig, it always gets hung up. If you fish heavy timber, shell beds, rock, football jig is prone to get wedged in a crevice worse than any jig out there. That's where this right here comes in. This triangular head allows it to be a lot more weedless than your football jig. It comes through branches and root systems and just anything you might throw it in, it's going to come through there a lot better than a football jig. At the same time, if you look here, the jig is wider than it is tall, and it has these little angles on it. So it may not always come out straight up, but it's only going to be turned at this angle here or this angle here. The big deal about that is it's always going to be somewhere in the top of the mouth, which is perfect. It's exactly what you want. The last key feature on the head is the bottom itself has a little bit of a curve to it. The bottom has a little bend to it. So when you drag that jig, that head will actually rock like a football jig and get those claws on that crawl to kind of waving at those fish and kicking around, make that skirt pulsate, gives it a little more action on that dead slow drag like we love to do in the hot summertime, typically with a football jig, but now with the hybrid jig. As you guys can see, you can literally do anything with this jig. If you love to fish a jig the way that I do, you know, we're known for that around Lake Fork. We catch a lot of big fish on jigs at that lake. If you are passionate about jig fishing or you want to learn how to be a good jig fisherman, this is absolutely a jig that you have to own. You can do everything all at once. I mean, you can skip this under docks, you can flip it into bushes, you can pitch it in a creek channel, you can drag it out deep, you can stroke it on structure. I mean, there's nothing that you want to do with the jig that this jig won't do and perform as good or better than any jig on the market today. All right, let's talk colors a little bit. I'm not real particular on colors. I like, in the summertime for my area, I like a lot of green and brown. This color right here is crawfish drone. This color right here is grass mutant. They both have green and some tint of brown in it with just a touch of like a blue highlight, a little bit of blue fake, a little bit of blue sheen, a little bit of blue in it. You know, these fish out here where I live, in the summertime they eat a lot of brim, And when you got a green and brown base with a little bit of blue flash, that is a perfect imitation of brim right there. You know, as we get in the fall, and especially as we get into wintertime, I really like the blacks. Black light is one of my favorite colors from 6-inch lures. Black and purple with a little bit of blue flake. And Cajun crawl is another one. It's a black jig, and it's got chartreuse and neon orange. And it's kind of a top secret guide trick, so y'all won't be telling everybody. Just keep that one to yourself if you don't mind. But Cajun crawl, black light, I like those colors in the wintertime. And then once I get back into summer, boy, I like that green and brown, crawfish drone, grass mutant. So there you go, guys. Go check out the hybrid jig. Like I said, if you're into jig fishing, if you want to learn about jig fishing, it's kind of a must-have. Hey, we appreciate you guys watching this today. Hope it helps you catch more big fish. Y'all get out there and get after some jig fish. Boy, that's a fun way to do it. We'll see you next time.